Welcome to this practitioners discussion session on the world's best safety media campaigns, where we're discussing safety promotion and awareness campaigns from around the world as acknowledged through the International Safety Media Awards program. My name is Barbara Minuzzo and I'm the coordinator for the International Safety Media Awards program, which is run by the Center for Safe Alaskans. I'd also like to acknowledge the support of Safe Compact in providing technical assistance for today's discussion. Joining me today is Dr. Andres Villaveces. Dr. Andres is a senior scientist at the US Centers for Disease Control. He has over 25 years of experience implementing injuries and violence prevention initiatives. Features of his career include advancing global research for the prevention of injuries among children, advising on multi-million-dollar global injuries and violence prevention projects, and leading data systems integration for implementation of multi-sector transport safety injuries and violence prevention projects, involving coordination with governments, practitioners, and academic partners. Welcome, Dr. Andres. Thank you very much for making the time to speak with us. Dr. Andres, to start with, can you tell us about your connection to the International Safety Media Awards program?
Certainly. I have participated before as a judge of different variety of projects on a couple of iterations of this award. And in doing so, learned a lot about the different approaches that different countries do, but have been collaborating with a larger group of global experts on evaluating the different approaches that people use and the wide variety of media that are used to convey safety messages globally.
Let's turn specifically to your work and research into violence prevention. What have you seen work well for safety media campaigns that aim to reduce violence? And what were some of the challenges and successes for the teams in developing and implementing these campaigns?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and it really depends. The type of messaging that you have depends on the audience that where you want to convey your messages. In the work that we do, we use, for example, to engage with governments or policymakers. We use case studies, sometimes infographics, and we use a lot of visual aids to convey not only the magnitude of a problem, but perhaps potential solutions to the problem. And so some of those media are static, some of those media are more dynamic in the sense that they provide a story, etc., that can help actually document and give a human sort of tone and connotation to a particular situation. And then other audiences, for example, the general public can benefit certainly from proper explanations about a problem that usually, I guess, link the problem to conditions where communities can relate to their own experiences. To that effect, videos or looking at the experiences that people have had in a particular community which is the same target of that information has been useful. And in other settings, stories, for example, using symbolism or using just stories like a soap opera style types of activities have been used successfully to actually address issues, for example, like gender violence or community violence. And then using the soap operas that can be either in printed matter or in video matter or through radio. For example, they have been used like that. Other tools that we have used, for example, to convey some of the messages around violence against women are podcasts. We recently used, for example, some podcasts in a couple of indigenous languages for a region in South America, in a particular country, to actually uh, convey and arrive to a set of communities that have a different language, have a different culture. So getting people from that community to convey and
Yes.
discuss issues around the topic of violence against children in their own language through a podcast was another interesting way of doing it.
So, how did that differ when you were working in road safety, for example, or even the current programs you're involved in relation to holistic health and well-being in terms of children together for girls? Or what were some of the similarities? What have you seen work well for getting the intended messages across by the media campaigns?
Um, the topic is certainly different. The topic of violence prevention is very different from the topic of road safety. Both, obviously, from a public health perspective, have a huge impact on people, but that impact is very different, and it's perceived in a different way. Um, road safety usually in road safety, for example, messages are conveyed through um, simulations or through sort of showing vignettes of what happens when you don't follow, for example, some safety conditions, or providing in a very creative way information on, you know, what can happen to an individual when they don't follow particular safety behavior, etc. Those are very different from the ones that are used on violence prevention. And violence prevention, a lot of messaging is used around experiences of people, victims, for
Mm-hmm.
example, testimonies that people use to convey their personal and individual experience. And so, to that degree, they are a bit different. But again, you know, they vary a lot. Depends on the audience. When you look at policymakers, maybe it's more similar. What you want to say, the language and the type of media that you use to convey a particular message is certainly different depending on your audience.
Mm-hmm. You've been involved in lots of different resources in your career time. The more recent one that I'm familiar with is the Inspire framework, being part of that team. Can you tell us a little more about that and how people could utilize that to um, help them when they're developing their campaigns or their programs? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
The the Inspire framework is a strategy that was developed by 10 different agencies, some of them UN agencies, some from a variety of countries. Um, and it basically is a strategy that it's a framework that selects 7 different strategies on how to prevent violence. How have we used them? So a lot of the work that we do, we some of the work that I'm doing right now is working on um, developing and implementing violence against children surveys in a variety of nations. But once we collect that information, one of the main premises of these surveys is to use the information for action. So we actually
Mm-hmm.
have some seminars, some workshops that are called data to action. And,
Mm-hmm.
and from that, what we want as an outcome is national action plans from countries and a
Yes.
very large set of activities addressing violence. So using these tools and using these strategies um, can help us devise a set of locally based type of interventions and policies aimed at reducing violence against children. The
Mm-hmm.
Inspire is a framework that helps us identify a series of interventions that are evidence based. And to
Mm-hmm.
the degree that we can promote those interventions using media, it is quite useful. In fact, some of the examples that I brought to you a few seconds ago, the podcasts, etc., have been used in the context of getting communities engaged, getting local governments engaged, responding to a particular issue. But the purpose in the end is to actually get governments to change. So we work also very closely with policy leaders and And we, on many occasions, use this framework. In fact, in many countries, we're using it right now. And we are actively working to create national action plans that then are adapted at a local level. So it is a very useful tool to actually use information, but use information for action. I think this is an important aspect, is that, you know, we can't stay in just the generation of evidence, but transitioning to action. And media is an incredibly powerful tool that can help you to actually effectively convey messaging that can lead to that action.
Thank you for elaborating on the INSPIRE framework. I know that you're also very passionate about evaluating programs. Would you like to talk about the role of evaluation in safety media campaigns? So, you know, how do we know that what we're doing makes a difference? Please describe some evaluation methodologies and outcomes.
That is indeed an incredibly important aspect, evaluating and you know, in the context of what I was just mentioning to you about the different programs and the data to action and the generation of policies. One very big component is inserting in the different interventions that we do elements of evaluation. The use of media, first of all, two things. One is using media to evaluate things. One can document in a way, and so use media to document a baseline type of situation, and then document it again after an intervention, and show the evidence through, for example, a visual media or an audio media or a series of activities. So that's one way of using media to evaluate a particular intervention. Another issue that I've been more involved with the ISMA awards is the use of media to actually change a particular behavior or a particular issue. And so having the design of a particular program or intervention that uses media as its core element to change some type of situation or a type of behavior requires that intervention be measured in different ways. So the measurement of a series of process indicators that might be associated to the way in which that particular intervention is designed is really important throughout the entire period. So there are two uses. One, to use media to evaluate certain interventions. The other one is to actually implement media-related interventions and evaluate those media-related interventions. Those require the creation of a variety of indicators that can, you know, measure what occurs at baseline and what occurs later at the end. And then you have process measures, and then you have outcome measures that you can apply or you could look at. I can't define which ones because obviously the wide array of issues that you can tackle using media is huge. So all of those indicators would certainly vary considerably depending on the topic or the issue that you're addressing.
Thank you for that. Also, Dr. Andres, can you please talk more about how using media to promote safety works differently in different countries? You've gained a lot of experience working around the world, so can you tell us more about different countries, how it works differently?
Certainly. Well, I was just mentioning those podcasts. Culturally and cultural appropriateness is extremely important, and I think understanding how media is used and interpreted by people in a local setting is essential. Right now, for example, there in the context of the pandemic, we're actually there's several really good examples that we are using through radio, for example, to actually engage parents and address or promote positive parenting strategies in the context of the pandemic to reduce violence against children and violence in the home. So some of those have reached millions of people. So, you know, utilizing radio is important. There are other ways of conveying this. In some of the interventions that we used in very localized settings, for example, use dance or use and that dance and the documenting of that dance, or some cultural expressions addressing the violence problems, is also another way of conveying it. I had mentioned the soap operas, the telenovelas that have been used
Yeah.
sometimes in Latin America in written form, and some of those have been used very successfully to
Yeah.
actually address gender-based violence or violence in the community. And so there's a story that is released on a weekly basis, for example. Sometimes, if it's written, it can be, delivered through mass transportation systems, or if it's an audio through the radio, etc. And the stories engage the population, but part of the purpose of the story is to address the violence and to actually change norms and values. So, linking that to your previous question, if you measure the baseline and after the fact norms and values among the population, those are interesting ways of looking at the potential effect of a media intervention.
Hmm. Thank you. Do you have any thoughts on the production quality? What do you say to the comment, it does not have to be the big city ad agency polished? Production quality should be intentional to enhance the intention of the message. And you have covered some of that just in your previous comments, but I just wondered, like, what about the production quality and creative changes even over the years, the visuals and the video graphics and the way that we creatively try and present data? How have you seen that um, change over the years?
Well, I agree with you that the the data and the quality, the data and the quality are important. They're extremely important and relevant, but they don't have to be a studio type or a Hollywood type of production by all means, not at all. I think it's really important that the message and the delivery is good enough to arrive to the population. Obviously, it requires certain technical qualities and certain editorial qualities so that the message is of good quality, but that doesn't mean that it has to be some incredibly technologically sophisticated or expensive type of investment. Like I say, radio, for example, messaging through radio, a very simple type of expression and of medium, is incredibly important to convey and has been very effective in actually arriving to millions of people and conveying a positive message in relation to violence, for this particular example. I was having a ton of problems with my computer, but now I'm connected back in the proper way. Um, so yes, so I was saying that these this technologically, and there's an editorial process, and obviously a basic technology that needs to be good, so as to not allow the technology to actually interfere in the message. But I think a proper message delivered in a simple way is good enough. So it does not have to be sophisticated at all from the perspective that you ask, studio wise.
Mm, yes, thank you. Um, and you've seen lots of changes, though, the way that researchers have creatively presented their research in terms of their data and everything. It's really evolved over the last, decades that you've been part of this um, uh, research with the communities.
Well, as technology evolves, certainly the delivery mechanisms evolve too. Currently, with online technology, as I was talking about podcasts a few years ago, that didn't exist, and that's an old technology already. We have
Mm.
all this social media type of technologies now that are being used currently and that constantly are evolving. Those technologies are welcome and are actually incredibly powerful tools to be used. So that evolution and the use of that technology is actually welcome and desired, because that's what people are using and change, and yeah, using over time.
So that change is good. That doesn't preclude the use of other more traditional technologies, like I mentioned, radio. But it certainly, many people in the world use, mobile devices, social media. So delivering messages through social media tools is also incredibly important.
Yes, yes. So to finish off, would you like to share some key tips for practitioners that are undertaking safety media campaigns?
Yes, I would actually. I think one, I am not going to delve into the sort of artistic or editorial nuances of that, because I am by far not an expert in that. But what I would certainly advise is that an element of evaluation to verify or to document the effect of the media intervention is really important. You mentioned a campaign. Not necessarily has to be a campaign. A media tool actually can be used in the context of a larger intervention. But I think it is essential really to teach people who are engaged in this particular technologies and delivery of messages, to actually evaluate, to actually embed this and have some measures where they can demonstrate at the end that there was indeed an effect. And an effect could be a process effect, but it also could be a change in attitudes or a change in behaviors. There's many things that could be measured, and I do think that it's very important to embed this and include this in the design of a media intervention.
Absolutely, yes. Okay, so I'd like to thank you so very much, Dr. Andres. It's been great to hear more from you and hear about all the different tips and things from you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Before we finish off, just a reminder that due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Safety 2020 conference has been postponed until November 2022, with the virtual global event to take place in the meantime on the 22nd to the 26th of March 2021. The winners of the 2020 International Safety Media Awards will be announced at the March 2021 global event, so stay tuned for information around this time. Thanks again for joining us for this discussion about some of the world's best safety media, as recognized by the International Safety Media Awards program. Thank you also to the Center for Safe Alaskans for founding and sponsoring the International Safety Media Awards since 2006. And to all our global leaders and colleagues, as always, we wish you success in improving safety outcomes for your community. Thank you.